Most video games only get one shot. They launch, they get reviewed, and the court of public opinion slams down its verdict, good, bad, or somewhere in between. And that's usually where the story ends. But sometimes a game comes back. Whether it's a massive update that fixes everything that held it back in the first place, or a sudden surge in popularity thanks to Twitch, YouTube, or going to a subscription service like Game Pass or PS Plus. Some games get a second chance, and when they do, something strange happens. The conversation shifts, the same title people once ignored or hated suddenly becomes a cult favourite or even a classic. And recently I've been playing a few games in the same genre. One that absolutely rewrote its legacy years after launch. Another that I believe was never really given a fair shot, even though it deserved one. And another that I'm glad I returned to because it became one of my favourite games of all time.
You'll not take my prize! The black car is mine!
So let's go back to 2015 when Mad Max was released. Open world games were at their height. Every single game was in this genre, and 17-year-old me was eating up all of them. The issue was that I didn't have much money, and there was another open world game releasing the exact same day, and that was Metal Gear Solid 5. I hadn't really touched the series up until that point, but the sandbox stealth gameplay had me hooked. So I was busy and barely even knew about Mad Max outside of a couple of YouTubers that I watched. And it seems like a lot of people were in the same boat. Look at this Reddit post about the release date of Mad Max. People saying it's a bad idea to go up against Kojima, or pointing out that they didn't even show much gameplay. The game didn't really have much hype leading up to it. Now, what I do remember was Total Biscuit's video. He championed the game for what it is. A fairly iterative but super fun open world game, even going as far to make a whole video about the negative reception towards the game and the difference between the average gamer and critic experience. And looking back on it, I see that it seemed very harsh for what it was. Fair enough, Mad Max doesn't go above and beyond with innovative mechanics or this, that and the other, but it makes the slower moments inherent to open world games more fun. And that's a common thread among the 3 games in this video. Open worlds are a distraction, and the quality of the game depends on how engaging the distractions are in between the big moments. Take Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom for example. If you watch this gameplay without playing the game, you think it's boring. Link is slow, your horse just plods along. You might think I'm wandering aimlessly here, but because they use organic discovery so well, I'm actually looking out for that next point, the next cave, the next shrine, the next enemy encampment, the Korok, or them stupid lads with the signs. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom thrive in the quieter moments, and that's one of the many reasons why they're among the best open world games ever created, and why I've put over 200 hours across both. And Mad Max does the exact opposite, where Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Death Stranding, all of these games relish in these quieter moments. Mad Max just goes, no. Here is a big, loud vehicle that you can customize, you can put spikes on it, you can ram into things, the engine is really, really loud. And you know that in the Mad Max universe, cars are super important. And in another open world game, this wide open desert would be so boring. But the fact that you're driving around in this car makes it a lot more engaging. I think examining the Mad Max situation now as a game reviewer, as somebody who's been doing this for a couple of years, it's interesting to see how my mindset has shifted. When I was 17 and I could only buy one game every couple of months or whatever it was, I would have to get a lot of time out of it. So a game like Mad Max, that yes is fairly repetitive but has a lot of content, would have been way more appealing to me back then than it is now. And I think that's a problem between the reviewer and your average gamer. And I watched Total Biscuit's video and he brought it up too, where if you looked at the Mad Max reviews on Steam, everybody was super positive because, oh, I spent $60 on this game and I can get 50 or 60 hours out of it, whereas critics were on the complete opposite side of saying, oh, this is a bit repetitive, or I don't like that they make me do this all this time, and driving around this open world can be kind of boring. But that's just the difference between your average gamer and a critic, and I even find myself in that situation now, because I would much rather less content in a game, but the overall quality of that content being so much higher. And a big reason for that is because I just play so many games. Over the past couple of years, I've reviewed so many different games and I'm always on the lookout for something new, whereas people who are investing this sort of money into it might want something that's a bit safer. And that's what we see across the board with why people buy remasters and remakes. People would much prefer have a sound investment that they know they will enjoy to a certain extent than take a risk on a game that would potentially turn out to be an absolute waste of money. And the biggest takeaway from the Mad Max situation, and why I think it got a second chance, if you go onto YouTube and have a look at Mad Max retrospective or Mad Max 5 years later or these types of videos, there are so many of them that get crazy amounts of views and everybody's really positive on the game. And another factor that again was brought up in Total Biscuit's video was the critics talking about the Arkham combat. So this was 2015. We had Arkham Knight, Asylum, City, Shadow of Mordor. There were loads of games that were using this combat system. And if you're a game critic or a reviewer or somebody that just plays a lot of games and you've played all of them games with that Arkham combat, it would get very repetitive, and that was a problem with the reviews. All the critics saying that they're just sick of the Arkham combat, and I totally get that, but your average person probably wasn't. And again, going back to that safety thing, they probably enjoyed the fact that, oh, this is familiar, this is something that I know, and I know that I like that combat, so my investment would be a bit sounder. And I think I'm in a similar situation right now with Souls-likes or Man with a Sword games, because I love the From Software games, but now every time I watch a State of Play or an Xbox showcase and I see another third-person action game, Man with a Sword, kind of Souls-like, maybe not a Souls-like, I'm just really fed up of playing these games. And I wonder if I'm in a similar situation now with them games as people were with Mad Max back in the day. I wonder in 5 or 10 years if I go back and play Lords of the Fallen or all of these Man with a Sword games that are coming out, maybe if I play them in 5 or 10 years, I will give these games a second or even a first chance and say, oh, I was actually maybe wrong back then, or maybe it was just a time and place situation. And that's one of the main pillars of this video. Just because something was deemed as mediocre or good or bad back when it released, in 5 or 10 years, you have absolutely no idea how the conversation will shift. Most games, it stays the same, but for some of them, there is a massive resurgence in the game.
Another vulgar monument to the Cardifiles! Tear it down!
Days Gone is a game that I love. I put something like 80 hours into it when it released and platinumed it, and that's not something that I do very often. This is a game that I always wish was given a second chance, and it kinda has with the release of the PC version in 2021 and the PS5 version that only came out about a month ago. This was another product of its release time, and there are multiple factors here. It was rushed out to launch, and when reviewers got their hands on it, it was a buggy mess. So the already messy game was muddied by glitches, crashes, and performance issues. And it's another example of Sony fecking over a game, especially Sony Bend. There's just, I don't know, do Sony even like Bend? I'm not sure, but they always seem to just feck them over in some way, shape, or form. They're basically the bastard stepchild of the Sony family, and the fact that Days Gone isn't getting a sequel is kind of annoying, especially because the game actually sold pretty well. Looking back on the release date of Days Gone, it had so many things stacked up against it, and I think the number one thing was it being a Sony game and going up against The Last of Us and these really high budget AAA games, because I just think it's an unfair comparison. So Days Gone, just like all the other games in this video, is a massive open world, and it's very, very large. It might be too big, it might be slightly too long, but it's still a great game. And when PlayStation is releasing The Last of Us and Days Gone, there's obviously going to be a lot of comparisons between the two. They're both set in America, they're both post-apocalyptic stories. One is mushroom zombies and the other is just normal zombies, but there's very clearly going to be a lot of comparisons between the two. You can compare Red Dead 2 with The Last of Us, but Rockstar are an exception to the rule. Every single other open world developer you cannot compare to a 15 or 20 hour long narrative experience where everything is so tight and condensed. Because if you're Naughty Dog and you're looking at the fidelity of your game or the tightness of your gameplay or how impactful or well written the story is, you have a lot more resources and talent to throw at those things. Whereas if you're designing an open world game, you have to incorporate that into your overall bucket of what resources you have. You can't just put all your time into making the characters look absolutely fantastic and give them the most realistic graphics ever and the best written story. You have to develop open world systems where, does this map work? What's it like going between the different maps? Is this point of interest spaced out perfectly from this point of interest? Can you see this part of the map from here? Does it need to be rendered? There's loads of different things to take into account when you're making an open world game. So it's just an unfair comparison. And I also wonder if Days Gone was made by a third-party studio. If it wasn't, in the Sony family. Did Sony feck over Days Gone by training their consumers to expect a certain level of fidelity and overall polish from their games? I think they probably did. When you're a PlayStation gamer, you're used to playing God of War or The Last of Us. These are the upper tier of games, both in production quality and also artsy fartsiness. So I wonder if PlayStation gamers are just trained to expect that, and when they get something that admittedly is less, but not that much less, I think you're just setting the game up wrong from the get-go. And I just don't think it really ever had a shot with all of the things stacked up against it, because once again, as an open world game goes, just like Mad Max, Days Gone is a ridiculously fun game. When you get to the end of that and you can do all of the nests and clear out the hordes, it's so much fun. That's why I went to platinum it. And it does the exact same thing that Mad Max did, just slightly less so. You're not driving around in this open desert with this crazy loud car, but you are driving around with a crazy loud motorbike, and it's just really fun. Now, I think Days Gone is going through a similar enough resurgence to Mad Max, but maybe not as much as I had expected. I don't really like scores all that much. I find them mostly useless, but if you look at the Metacritic of Days Gone Remastered, it is slightly improved. I still think it probably should be a bit higher, but you can see that the reception has definitely improved. And if you go onto YouTube and search up Days Gone retrospective or this, that and the other, there are a load of newer videos of people finally playing the game and realizing like, oh, this is actually really good. And I think again, that's the difference between the critic and the normal player. Even if you look at the Steam reviews for the PC version, it's all very similar to the stuff that Mad Max had back in the day of, oh, I actually just really like this game, it's really fun, or the reviews turned me off this, but now I finally played it and I'm so glad that I did. And Days Gone, unfortunately, won't get a sequel. I wish it did. And I'm hoping now, over the next few years, it will have a big resurgence. Death Stranding is a game you'll either love or hate, and there's no in between. It's one of the hardest games to recommend, and this game highlights not being in the right headspace or mindset going into it. Where Days Gone and Mad Max are typical open world games that are quite easy to play, Death Stranding challenges you mechanically and narratively. Now, whether that narrative difficulty is caused by Kojima sucking himself off is up to you, but trying to figure out what's going on takes some thinking. And this is a game that I played when it first came out. I put like 5 hours into it, just put it down, never really thought about it after that. But then when it came out on the PS5, I reviewed it, and obviously it had a nice 60 FPS upgrade and a few other quality of life improvements, but I got hooked by the game, and it wasn't because of those upgrades. It was a time and place thing. This is why I encourage you to give a game a second chance. Give these games that you maybe started and didn't like a second chance, because a lot of the time you will actually find a game that you just weren't really in the mood for. It's the same with Days Gone and Mad Max. They are easy to play games, but sometimes you're just not in the mood for a checklist open world game. And another time in a year or two, if you went back and played them, you probably would be. So Mad Max and Days Gone gave you these crazy rip-roaring experiences in the in-between moments where you're driving around like a madman, shooting things, blowing things up, running over zombies, punching people. And that's what made their open worlds fun. But Death Stranding did the complete opposite. There's very little combat in it. Most of the time you want to just stealth around, but what it did that made it so good and made it so engaging is that every single step you took mattered. Because if we go back to Tears of the Kingdom, as I said, I'm walking around looking for the next point of interest, and that's what's keeping me going, even though it's a way slower experience than most other open world games. Then Death Stranding, while you are still looking at where you need to go, you're actually looking down at your feet and looking, oh, there's a rock there. Maybe I could trip over that. If I trip over that, I'm going to fall down this mountain and lose all of my cargo. And there's simply no other game like it, and that's why I love that I went back to it and realised what it is. Now, it is 100% a game that you have to be in the right headspace. Sometimes you finish up work, you sit down on the couch, you turn on your PlayStation, and you want to play something, I don't know, like Tony Hawk Pro Skater or some multiplayer game or just something that is simply fun to play. And if you're in that kind of mood or headspace, then playing something like Death Stranding mightn't suit you, because you could pop your headphones on, sit down, and have to watch a 25-minute long cutscene and then walk for 20 minutes really slowly and maybe die and then get frustrated and have to restart. And I'd imagine that there were a lot of people in the exact same situation as I was when I played Death Stranding the first time. And there are loads of other games that deserve second chances, because some got wrapped up in some discourse where they came out and they really shouldn't have, or others are just a complete time and place thing. And I did ask my Discord members about games they gave a second chance to, and one of them was brought up a couple of times, and it's a game that I also fell off of, and I think if I went back to it in a different mindset, I probably would enjoy it. Also, join the Discord down below if you want to be featured in upcoming videos, because I'm going to implement this a bit more into these more conversational videos. The main game everybody brought up was Red Dead Redemption 2, and this is 100% a time and place thing. I think I put 40 hours into it and then gave up. But I do feel with a different mindset I could fall in love with it, just like Death Stranding. I think you have to meet these games where they are. And as I said, you need to be willing to sit down, lose yourself, pop the headphones on, and just be prepared to have to sit down and listen to a 20-minute long cutscene and then slowly walk through a town or something and get a bit more exposition and then maybe one shootout. So you just have to dedicate yourself to getting immersed in them. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't, but that's why these games are definitely worth giving second chances to. And speaking of the whole mindset or in a different headspace, another member wrote in about being in a depression and how returning to Resident Evil 7 of all games helps. And just the whole experience of overcoming your fears, something that I've had to do with horror games as well, just resonated with him at that time. And I feel I had a similar experience with Hellblade 1. I don't think this game is great by any means, but there was a certain section that really resonated with me emotionally. So that pulled me through the game, and I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would have. And it was only highlighted by my lack of enthusiasm when I played Hellblade 2, because the message there, it just didn't click with me. So the game itself was just like, it looks good, but that's about it. So yeah, let me know what games you gave a second chance to, because I'll read through the comments, and if there's a game in there that maybe you gave a second chance to that I need to give a second chance to because I put it down for whatever reason in the first time, I might go back and do like a second part to this. See, the thing with this whole headspace and time and place thing is that Death Stranding 2 is out the week that this video comes out, and I'm not sure if I want to sit down and play that game right now. I'm very excited for it. I absolutely adore Death Stranding 1, but I think playing that made me realize that I'm better off buying Death Stranding 2 whenever I know I have the time to dedicate, where I have 2 or 3 weeks where it's like, okay, this is my main game and I can give it the full time and effort that it deserves. So maybe I might play it now, but more than likely I won't. So let me know what games you gave a second chance to. I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.